Hi, welcome to Photoshop CC 2021 Classroom Book Chapter 1. This is all about getting to know the work area. So let's go ahead and go into our Photoshop and do a file open. And go ahead and, well, before we do that, let's go ahead and look at the home screen. So when you're on the home screen, you've got quite a few different elements. You've got the works you just worked on. You've got your home. You've got an opportunity to learn, which is tutorials. Just a lot of different elements that are available here. You can even do a create new or open from this one as well instead of just the file open. But I'm going to go up here to file open. I'm going to go find my Photoshop tutorial lessons that I've got here. I'm going to go here to lesson number 1 and grab that start file. I'm also going to open that end file real quick so we can see what the end result is. So file open, and let's take a look at the end. And open. So if I do a window, maybe it's going to take a little bit longer. All right, let's do a window, workspace, or arrange. Let's go to a vertical. We can see our examples side by side. So it makes it really easy to kind of see where we're going and where we're coming from. So you can either always use those arrange functions or you can drag and drop them around. I can now drag this and drag it into this one. It's going to turn back into that consolidated tabs. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is do a file save as. We're going to make sure we're in our lesson 1. We're going to do a first initial, last name, underscore, Photoshop, classroom in a book, chapter 1. I'm in my lesson 1 folder and save. If you get this maximize compatibility, go ahead and say yes. You can always do the turn it off thing too. All right, so one of the main difference between Photoshop and Macs is the way that Photoshop is contained. I'm working on a Windows computer, which means that it will show my application frame always, whereas you can change how you're going to look at it if you're on a Mac. So if it looks different, that is why. All right, so we've got this flower. We're going to go ahead and make it into a card. One of the first things I want you to do is get comfortable with the Tools panel. The Tools panel is over here on the left-hand side. You're going to notice at the top there's 2 little tiny arrows. If you double-click those, it allows you to change how that panel is going to lay out. So I generally like mine as a 1 column. Some people like it as a 2. You can always hit those double arrows and collapse and stretch different types of panels. You can also take and collapse, and with your bar you can even make it even smaller. So depending on how you're working, a lot of times you'll be working on a laptop and your screen space is really small, so that's where having these abilities to look at those things really comes in handy. Another thing to look at down here is your percentage. The percentage shows you what type of scale or enlargement is going on. So it's 67.67%. So we're not looking at it full size. So let's go ahead and go to Window, or let's go to View, and let's go View 100%. And that would show you, say 100%, shows you the actual size. You can also look down here and see the inches of how big our card is and what points per inch it is. So if you want to, you can always change those. So maybe you want document size. So there's quite a few different elements that you can do to play with that. Let's go ahead and zoom back out. I'm going to do Control minus and zoom out so I can show you the zoom tool. The zoom tool over here looks like a magnifying glass. And if I plus on something, it'll let me zoom in. If I hit Alt or Option, it will turn into the minus. So it lets you zoom in and zoom out. Another way to zoom in is if you've got this scrubby zoom turned on, it will allow you to just with your mouse drag back and forth and zoom in. And you're probably wondering, why would I ever want to get to this pixel level? Well, there's a few times in things like restorations where you're trying to get things really cleaned up, and that's where you want to go down to that level. All right, so now we've learned that one. So let's go ahead and click Fit Screen in the options bar. It's up here. So now we're back to normal. Let's go ahead first and brighten this image. So we're going to go over here to the Layers panel. You're going to work in the Layers panel a lot in Photoshop. it's basically one of the main reasons that Photoshop acts a little bit different. Think of layers as pieces of glass stacked on top of each other. This one that says ribbons is the piece of glass that's on top of the sandwich. The one that says rows is the piece that's on the bottom of the sandwich. So then we can, whatever's on top relates to what's underneath, which I know sounds really weird, but as you start working through tutorials and through the different lessons, it's going to make a lot more sense. All right, so in our layers panel, we want to make sure that we have our rows layer selected, which means it's kind of grayed out. We want to come up here to the adjustments panel, and we want to add an adjustment. We want to do the brightness contrast, which is the very first adjustment. It's this kind of the sun. We're going to go ahead and click that. It's going to give us some options. And in the panel here, we want to go ahead and change our brightness up to 98. And let's take that contrast to 18. Oop. And hit tab. So now you can see already we've done a lot just to make this picture a whole lot better. So now we're going to go ahead and look at a few other things. You'll see that this brightness, so we talked about layers, is applying to this layer down below. And what's nice about using adjustment layers is they can be turned on and off, and you haven't actually disturbed any of the pixels in the image itself. Sometimes you want to destructive edit. This time we do not. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is sample a color. So when we work with colors in Photoshop, we've got a foreground and a background. They're normally set to black and white. You can switch them back and forth. So let's go ahead on our rose layer. There we go. And now let's go ahead, turn our ribbon layer on because we want to sample something in the ribbon. Let's come down here to our eyedropper tool. It might be under the ruler. Mine's right here, the eyedropper. And I'm going to click on this blue area to select a color. Now see, depending on where you click, you're going to get a slightly different color of blue. So let's go ahead and choose that blue color. So we know we're going to be using that blue. The next thing we're going to do is work with our units of measure. So if you're on a Mac, it's going to look a little bit different. On a PC, it's Edit Preferences. On a Mac, you need to go to InDesign, the little sign up here in the corner, and under Preferences. And let's go ahead and go to Units and what am I looking for? Units and Rulers. And I want to make sure that I am in inches. And while I'm here, I also want to go to Performance. And I want to take those history states up as high as it goes. Because when you're erasing, every single time you erase counts as a history state. So if you're doing a lot of little tiny work, all of a sudden you've used up all and you can't go back as far as you may want to be able to go. All right, so now I'm in inches. I can tell that from up here. All right, so now we're going to use some of our menus. So let's go ahead to our context menu. Let's go ahead and grab our rectangle marquee, which means it's going to draw a rectangle shape, not necessarily a rectangle. And we want to drag and pull until we've got a banner, basically, which is about, how big do they want? 0.75 tall. Ooh, I did it really well. And 2.5 inches wide, so mine's a little bit wide. So I'm looking at that W and H to get those numbers, and they don't have to be exact. And now we're going to get what's called the dancing ants, or marching ants. It's also called the selection marquee. So now the thing we want to do is color this. So let's come here into our brush. We're going to grab our brush tool. Up in the top, we want to go ahead and look, or we're going to do a right click on our brush tool. And let's go ahead in the box and click. We want our size. We want a soft round brush, which is what we have. And let's go ahead and set it to about 65 pixels. And we want a hardness of 0. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to take my space bar and turn it into a hand so I can see things. And now I'm going to go ahead and color over that. Now I'm getting kind of a see-through color, which I don't necessarily want. So let's go ahead and take a peek at what's going on there. So what I've got going on is my opacity up here set to 63 instead of 100. So now if I go through, it's going to give me a much better color. And notice how I'm going outside the lines. It will only color what's inside the selection. So that works really, really well. And I just did it on the wrong layer. So I should have been on my ribbons layer. I'm going to do an undo. And since I messed it up, I'm going to go undo again. And now I'm going to be on my ribbons layer and make that marquee. So definitely pay attention to which layer you are on. I'm going to grab that brush again. And you can even make it bigger. If you go by the P, there's square brackets. If you hit those square brackets, you can use those to color. All right, so I'm much happier with what I've got now. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Control S and save. And I'm going to do a Control D to turn off my dancing ants. All right. All right, so now we're going to select using hidden tools. So next thing we want to do is play with some of the tools here under the lasso. Yours probably says lasso. You want to hit the little tiny disclosure corner on the corner, and let's grab that Polygonal Lasso. And we're actually going to draw and take out this little notch in the ribbon. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my layers panel. I've got my ribbon. I'm going to zoom in, so Control plus, space bar, and zoom up. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a line to the bottom. Come up here to about the middle. And come up here again. And now I'm going to have some dancing ants. And I'm going to hit delete and go ahead and take that part out. Now because we have the rose on a different layer, it doesn't accidentally take that rose out. So it's exactly perfect the way we want it right now. Okay, so now we want to go ahead and put some words in there. So let's do a Control D, turn off our dancing ants. Let's do a Control minus, or we can zoom out. Hit the Alt key, we can zoom out. All right, so I want to go ahead and grab my text tool. I want my horizontal type. I'm going to go up here to my control bar and choose a font, any font you like. You can be pretty standard and use like a Myriad or a Minion Pro, doesn't matter. I've got about 10,000 on here because I do a lot of random stuff. So I'm going to put this on here. I'm going to say I want it regular and I want it to be about 32 points. Or I can use what's called the scrubby, which is underneath here. All right, so let's go here. I'm going to click, and it's going to give me what's called lorem ipsum, which is this kind of dummy text. Instead, I'm going to write my name. And apparently, this font does not have any L's. So I'm going to select all, Control A, and let's go find another one that actually has L's in it. All right, so mine's a little bit big, so let's go ahead and take it down just a little bit. Let's try 30. All right, so that's not too bad, but it's still a little bit tall. So I'm going to hit my Move tool. And I can either move my name or I can move the ribbon, totally up to you as to what you're going to do. I don't mind sticking out of the ribbon. All right, so I'm okay with that one. All right, so maybe I want to make the swatches a new color. So I'm going to go here into my swatches. I'm going to see that I've got a bunch of different kinds of swatches. I can actually make that panel a little bit bigger by grabbing the bottom. And let's go ahead and take a peek at the pastel group. And from there, let's go ahead and choose this yellow. All right, so that's what we ended up using for this color. So if I don't like this color, let's go ahead and grab our text tool, highlight the whole thing by double clicking, and I can go ahead and choose a different color out of my panel here. So I chose a pink. So I'm gonna hit there and decide, okay, I picked pink, but it's kind of blending in a little bit. So let's try one other color. Triple click and let's make it, I'm gonna go with this orange. And escape. That's not too bad. And as always, if you hate it, you can always undo. Undo is your best friend. Control Z, Control Z is undo. I'm going to do a Control S and save what I've got right now. So panels, panel locations, we've been talking, you can move them around. As we go through different lessons, different tutorials, you're going to see me move things around quite a bit. It just really depends. I can pull these properties out. I can dock them over here on the side, kind of like we do in InDesign. So there's a lot of different ways to make them more useful for whatever it is you're trying to do. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this one back down into here. And if you lose something, it's not the way you want, go back to Workspace and do Reset Essentials, and it'll put everything back where it used to be. So that could be a big help. All right, so we talked about those. So that's basically all you're going to do for this lesson. It's mostly just about getting to learn the different tools and how to find things. So make sure you do a Control S and save. Unlike InDesign, you do not need to turn in a packaged file. You're just going to turn in the PSD as it is. So that's all you need to do for lesson number 1. Can't wait to see your cards.